Hi, I'm Diane McGarry with Drake Arts. With me today are co-host Tom McGarry, artist Ilene Richard, and ASL interpreter Julia. Ilene is a fine arts painter and children's book illustrator working out in the Berkshires. Her focus is figurative painting, but she also experiments with various other subject matters. Whether she paints in her graphic style or a more portraiture, oh my gosh, I can't say that word. Portrait approach, Ilene uses wonderful color combinations to enhance her overall finished paintings. There is an excitement when visitors enter her studio at the Clock Tower in Pittsfield. Her vast display of paintings keeps you finding new and exciting elements in her work. Always a fun place to visit during the summer months. I understand that you had a vision for yourself as an artist and then switched to another medium before returning to painting. Could you talk about how this unfolded and what the process was like?
Well, I've changed lanes a few times in my art career. I think a lot of it had to do with looking for job opportunities. I think that's what happened when I graduated from art school. So when I got out of school, my focus was children's book illustration, which is what I wanted to do. And when I couldn't nail down a job going to New York and trying to interview and all these things, initially, right out of school, I ended up because I was also doing jewelry design work in school as well, and so I ended up working at a in a what they call a sweatshop in the jewelers building in Boston,
Oh,
and created a lot of jewelry and one of a kind pieces there, and a lot of custom pieces, and that kind of put me in a different path for a short period of for a period of time where I was creating jewelry for a lot of galleries and custom pieces, et cetera, et cetera. Um, but over a period of time where it's one of those things you kind of succeed with the things you have goals set in mind, and I've kind of succeeded in those with those goals with my jewelry, and I kind of wanted to get back to my roots, which was drawing, and re-entered the whole children's book, the whole concept of wanting to be again a children's book illustrator, because that never disappeared. So to do that, was changing gears completely. So I ended up going back to school, trying to figure out the industry because it had changed a lot since I had been at school, and establishing myself as a children's book illustrator, and then getting an agent and getting jobs and working in that industry.
sure.
Um, and then when the industry, and I did this for a long time, so when the industry sort of changed, which it does, there was a lot of companies were buying art, stock illustrations from a lot of less expensive ways of creating art. um so I sorry, my phone decided to call right when I'm doing this. So instead of, as an artist or a creative person, you can't just stop what you're doing. So I ended up creating a studio for myself where I was painting large paintings and kind of continued the path of being a creative person, but in a different, presenting the work in a different way to the public.
What what enthralled you about being a children's book illustrator? Because I have to say, when I homeschooled my children, when they were little, and when I was homeschooling them, especially before they could read, not that they could read at a normal age, but I really got books out from the library where the illustrations were beautiful because they
Yes.
couldn't read yet. And I wanted, later the words can pull them in, but I wanted the illustrations and the pictures and paintings to pull them in.
Yes. I mean, I totally agree with that. Um, I always saw myself as a storyteller. The way my mind works and the way I present my work, even with my paintings, I feel that my paintings create a narrative. There's a narrative to my paintings, and I think people can relate to it. I when I'm doing my paintings, I try to get into character development. I'm always, when I do multiple ladies, I think about who are these people? What are they doing? Where have they been? Why they're out together as friends. But it was the same with the children's books, because character development is the biggest aspect of, creating children's books. Is once you get hired to do a book, it's creating the characters and then carrying them out throughout the whole book. And I love doing that. That was like I love being able to do, 15 spreads of the same character. Basically, you should be able, as an illustrator, children's book illustrator, but that you should be able to have these characters, be upside down, inside out, and then some, and be able to carry it throughout the whole book.
Yeah, yeah.
It's always fun for me. It was always a fun way of creating art.
That's you're bringing back all these board books. One of them was you're gonna laugh at me. I'm a musician, so I made the sounds into a song when basic was moo moo ba ba la 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 because it was all these animals and trying to get them to count, but there were different animals doing each number, how many hippopotamuses, how many cats, whatever, and we just had them singing, right? But that's bringing in another aspect to you're bringing art into the written word.
Yes,
So
yes.
important.
It is important. It's very important, and I have to say that even as an illustrator, there were many times, and we're talking about publishing houses that are, very well-known publishing houses that would go through committees, and it was always interesting to me that I would be the one that would read a manuscript, and I have to say, I'd read a manuscript because I'm trying to translate the words or these, these parts of these books that make sense to be able to translate them into illustrations. And there were times when you'd look at the words and say, "This is not making sense."
Yeah.
You know, I'd have to get back to the editor and say, let's read this together because maybe it's just me because I know I'm just the illustrator and
Right,
it's
right,
not,
right. Yeah. Put yourself
everybody
in your
else.
lane, but say, will you look from your lane, please? Yes.
Right. And it's really interesting to be able to be put in that position where now you're reading this thing and then saying that, I'm just not seeing this the way, maybe you're seeing it. I could be wrong, but I have to be honest, most of the time I was always correct in that assessment, when I would read the manuscript and they say, oops, you're right. You know,
Yeah.
one of the things that in children's books, the point of view is always, show, don't say. So it's the idea of bringing in elements in the illustrations that you don't necessarily have to write in the written word, because the pictures are going to tell a story of a scene or extra things that I would put into an illustration that were the fun parts, all the, anything random that would be on a set, like setting a table of things that doesn't have to be explained in a story, but it could be put in the illustration, which makes it really fun. And I've been fortunate enough to have done some really fun projects over the year, that are still out in the universe, that are still, still sold on Amazon and have done well. And that's kind of exciting too, to still see those books, still circulating, getting really good reviews, loving the illustrations, because that always, means a lot to me when,
Sure.
when I put my heart and soul into something and people respond to it. So I mean, I do the same thing with my paintings. It's the same, it's the same kind of emotional connection that I have with my paintings, that I want to feel the same way as you do when you're looking at something, feeling like this is a finished product. This is a finished piece. That I'm not standing there questioning whether or not it needs to be revised. It's like, yeah, this is finished. I can show this now. I can post this. I can show this. People can come into my studio and see it hanging, and I can feel proud about that being a representation of what I do.
Yeah. So these are lots of transitions you've gone through. That's pretty
I
neat.
have. I really have, and I think it's made me a better artist in the whole picture of my life as as an artist. I've been, I like I said, I was in galleries with my jewelry. It really put a different, as a craft person, even though I hate saying in the word craft, because sometimes people think of it in a different way. But there is that art side and there's the, fine craft side.
Yes.
Because I am crafting jewelry. I was crafting it from scratch, and I did that for so many years. And also very exciting to see people, still reach. I still have people have reached out to me and asked me if I was, still doing jewelry work. And it's something that I love doing, but I have no regrets in stepping back from that and moving into the children's book illustration or getting back into my drawing roots and my painting. No regrets with changing careers. I know some people might think that, why would I do that? But it's okay. I think it's actually healthy to switch
Oh,
things up a little.
that's interesting. So I bet you bring some of the qualities from making jewelry into your portrait work now.
Always, I mean, completely. I mean, I think the refinement, I think working in such a way where, I have to make sure that everything is, let's just say, as close to perfection as I can make it. That doesn't leave you. Doesn't matter what medium you're working in.
No,
Um, I like to be looked at as the professional, and then when someone purchases something from me, that they can hang it or wear it or whatever it was at that period of time, or even a publisher, they can call, they can count on me to give them illustrations or work that's going to be perfect for them, that they don't have to keep calling me and say make revisions. And so that's really important to me. I've always taken this very seriously,
sure.
and I always have taken the extra mile. But I learned that through the process of putting myself out on the line in all these different areas. The expectations of what I have for myself are pretty high, and I've had, because I always want people to come back to me years later and say, I still love what your work is great. I love it, because that's really important to me. And I never wanted someone to say, oh, she does terrible work. I never wanted something like that to ever come back and haunt me. I wanted, especially in the publishing industry, because it's
Yeah.
interesting. It's actually a very small industry.
Huh.
In the big picture of it all, it's a very small industry. So I never wanted a publisher to ever get wind of, like, saying, oh, she was really difficult to work with and her work didn't come in, and that does happen. That
I'm
happens a
sure.
lot,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and so I wanted to make sure that I was, accommodating to the people, my customers, my clients, and to whoever I'm putting my work out to.
So what kind of painting do you like to do now? And some people start with photographs, some people start with sketches. How do you start? What's your process?
I flip-flop, I kind of flip-flop. These graphic ladies that I do are all out of my head.
Mhm.
I've always loved figure drawing. I mean, figure drawing was always something that I did when I was in college, and I've stayed true to that. It's something, I take that, the seriousness of figure drawing, and I've stylized it to kind of create my own interpretation of the figure.
Uh-huh.
Anatomically, they're pretty much close to what they should be, but not really. But I think that's what makes my work recognizable. And I think, a lot of people, even with my illustration work, I mean, people have always said, I'd know your work anywhere, I could recognize it. Which, again, as an artist, I think that's really what you always try to achieve,
Or
is
that's
to have a distinctive style that stands out amongst the millions of people who are, trying to do this. So how do I start? Sometimes I do a thumbnail sketch. Sometimes if I'm sitting and doodling, I will do a thumbnail sketch and I'll look at it and say, oh, I like this. I like this. This looks like this could work. And so I'll take a canvas, and I lay it out. I lay things out with a paintbrush now. I mean, years ago I used to use a pencil. I use a paintbrush. I draw with my paintbrush, basically. So I do a quick layout with my paintbrush so I can get the structure. And it also gives it that fluidity as opposed to having it look a little too rigid.
uh,
Um, and then from there, it's just developing, the shapes and the colors, and then it just evolves, and things, change as you go on. I mean, the paintings, you'll hear this from a lot of artists. The painting will tell you what it needs. There gets to a point where you just go, it's missing something, and so I have to keep, evaluating something and then, figuring it out. It's a process.
that's very interesting when what you said about starting with a pencil in the past, but now you start with a brush, and it just made immediately I thought of the different lines
Yeah.
because a pencil is very thin and it isn't necessarily straight, but unless you're going to the side and using it more like charcoal, excuse me, but um, a brush, depending upon how thick it is, a brush really has more curves in it.
Right.
Just using a brush brings a different depth to the line, which you would never get with a pencil. It's
Well, I
very,
use a really thick pencil, just to let you know. I don't use a really thin pencil because when you're working on a canvas, it's like a 36, let's just say randomly, a 36 by 36, which is a large canvas. I use one of those drafting pencils, those flat ones.
yeah,
So I was using one of those. I've decided why bother? I just, like I said, it's much easier. It's much easier to use a paintbrush, because then I have the lines and I can see it, direct. And I've done so many of these graphic ladies over the years that it's become very natural for me to be able to draw these ladies out. So my biggest thing with these drawings and these laying out of these figures and things, even my photo reference pieces, it's composition. I mean, that's the number one thing with my work. Composition is a number one, because I never want it to look a little, off. It should be interesting. It kind of frustrates me when I see paintings. You just go, well, they just a quarter of an inch. They're off a quarter of an inch. They got to fix that quarter inch. It's things like that. I become very, I see those things. I just see it.
Yeah. So for those of us who are not painters, who when you say composition, and I'm a musician, so I think of a composition of music,
Right.
and there's balance in there on
Right.
many levels. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean when you say composition for a painting?
Um, Composition being a balancing of the colors, the layout in such a way that makes it an interesting layout, so that I know that most of my paintings have parts of the figure that are off the canvas. I don't necessarily keep it within the canvas, the structure. I mean, a lot of people do, and it looks great. So it's not like,
No, it's
if
just a
you
choice. It's a
it's
choice.
just that I find it interesting to see parts of it off of the canvas, because I figure, why should I tell everybody everything? I mean, I figure, let the viewer, figure it out. Let them figure out something, that's going on outside of the canvas. And 9% of the time they will do that. So it's figuring out the colors, the patterns, the negative space, the positive space, because I like interesting negative space shapes. That also enhances the painting as well, the
Yeah.
negative space, because that's another strong element of, what I like to do, bring to my work.
So how did you get into painting these ladies?
That is a really good question. Um, so like I said, I always liked doing figurative work. I was actually given an opportunity. This goes back maybe about 15 years ago, to put some work into, where is it? Neiman Marcus in Boston. Okay, this is years ago.
Yes.
And I just said, it would be interesting to put together a collection of ladies. At the time, I was painting more like full figured women, which there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I could have continued that path. But for some reason, I made a decision to make them a little bit less full figured and a little bit more fashion forward, because it was going into the environment that it was going into.
Sure.
And they started evolving. So it's been a process of, constantly painting these ladies and trying to, I've changed the hair, the way I've done the hair over the years. I've changed the way I've painted the faces. There's been a lot of changes, but the actual compositions and the layouts and things have stayed pretty true. It's just, I think it's the maturity of having painted them so often that, you could see a big difference between the older work and the newer work. Yeah.
So these are old friends.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I always wait, when I leave my studio, I always have this joke, I have all these people in my studio and I have a lot of them hanging on the walls. I'm always hoping that maybe they would get off there and finish a painting for me one time. That would be really awesome, but
Oh,
they
see,
haven't done that yet.
I thought you were going to say, I wish they'd come home and have like beef bouillon or some sangria or
Right?
something.
I'd rather have them finish one of my works instead of them just sitting there and watching. That would be way more fun.
Huh. Have you ever thought about painting them painting?
Painting them painting. No, I actually haven't thought of that one. I'll have to give that some thought. But I do love, and so I'd have to say, so getting back to the people, um, so the past couple of years, I have been painting photo referenced people. So I'm doing more portraiture.
Uh-huh.
But even with that said, it's really important for me. It has to be the right photograph.
Yeah.
And I don't always use it directly. I mean, I change things. It's not like but the face it's really important for me to find the right photograph of somebody. Sometimes it has to be a certain character, the way they're looking or something. There's something that has to really so you can get the personality of the person, so that's really important to me. It's not just a portrait to me. It's about figuring out, who is this person? Do that you want to get to know this person,
Yeah.
and because my approach is sort of like in your face kind of approach, the way, because they're so close up and on big canvases, you feel it's kind of an intimate relationship that you have as the viewer when you're looking at them because you're so close up. So I really I've been loving doing this, over the years. I mean, I did a painting of my mother, and that was an interesting experience, I have to say. I did it about 4 years ago. She was here visiting, and she was 94 at the time.
Wow.
And I just said, this is an opportunity to paint my mother. And I've never thought of doing it before. I never thought of like, this is it. So I took some photographs of her sitting at the kitchen table holding a coffee mug. So I said, this is it. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to paint mother. And I tell you, I mean, it looks exactly like my mother, which is kind of interesting while, you leave the studio and you see your mother's face on the canvas. So that's kind of an interesting thing to do. But it's there's just so much emotion attached to doing portraits like that. Really knowing the person, or having this incredible connection with the face that you're painting. And I think that that's the work that is the strongest, one of the strongest pieces for me are the portraitures. Yeah, pieces.
That's interesting. I remember as you're speaking, I remember the different artists that have painted the presidents of this country and their wives.
Yeah,
And they talk about the majority of their time is getting to know the person that they're
yeah,
going,
yeah.
and how it's really a team effort,
It
right?
is. It is because every angle and every piece, every part of the face that you're painting, the eyes, the way the eyes, they're shaped, it becomes it's so important, it becomes such a big, part of the connection between yourself and the person that you're painting, and then of course then you take some liberties as well, um, where sometimes you just add maybe a pattern or things that may not be exactly what the person's wearing, but that's okay too. I mean, I think there are times you can add things, have that artistic liberty,
Right.
to do certain things,
Well,
that you can do that.
yeah, it's not a photograph.
Correct, it's not a
We don't,
photograph.
yeah, we don't have photographs of, I mean, we do have photographs of the presidents otherwise, but that's not what the gallery is for. The gallery is for the being of the person.
Right, right.
And that's such a different job.
Yeah, yeah. And I've really learned to appreciate doing that. But I think the most important thing is for me is that I love doing it. It's like I get really excited about the idea of doing this again,
Huh.
and finding the right photograph that's going to get me excited about wanting to paint that person, and or take a photo. And there have been times that I've kicked myself. I've been in these situations where I've seen somebody walk past me or something has happened, and I said, "Oh, I should have asked them if I could take their photograph." It's like that one moment you just say, "That would have that would have been a good painting." And I do it, but I don't always do it at the right time. And I walk away and I regret it afterwards. I said, "Oh, I should have asked that person." I should have asked that person to stop for a second.
So you pick random people to do
I
portraits.
do like doing that. I do like I when I was down in Florida, actually down in this past winter, I saw this guy at one of the art centers. They had this really nice thing where they invited artists to come and just, do whatever they wanted to do. They had materials, and I saw this guy walking around, and I said, I would just want like to draw this guy. He was just a really interesting face. He was dressed kind of fun and playful, and I asked him, I said, "Can I take your photograph? I'd like to draw you." And he was flattered. He said, "This is so great. I would love that. This is great." So yeah. But when I get excited about when I see someone like that, the drawing comes out well. I mean, that's part of it, you know.
Yeah, because
So if I'm excited,
there's that hook is already there.
yes, yes, it's that excitement. And then the fun part was as I'm drawing it, people were coming up behind me going, "Oh my God, I know who that is. That's so and so." And I said, "Yes, it is."
Oh, that's fun. Do you like people watching you paint?
I have no problem. I don't have a problem with that. Yeah, I really, that's fine. But I don't usually, like there's so many people that I know that do plein air painting that are outside and, painting. I do like doing the structure of my paintings in my studio because I like, it takes a lot of thought and, the process. I mean, I don't mind what people watching me paint after I get past that process.
Yeah.
Once I have it laid out and I know what I'm doing, then I don't mind painting it. I really don't like it when someone's standing behind me when it's a blank canvas and I'm not quite sure. I could probably the same thing with a writer. I'm sure if a writer's sitting there with a blank, piece of paper going, wait a minute, I can't, I need some time to, create. I need before I can just, start writing or doing whatever I'm doing. But it's sort of, that's what I've done. I've done a lot of presentations where I said I have to like start something and then at least I can paint in front of them. That's fine.
Yeah. Well, it gives you a focus and a reference point.
Right. Right.
It's interesting. Someone wanted to go with me once to a rehearsal, and I said it was like having somebody come and brush my teeth. Right? I mean, there are open rehearsals all the time, but usually when it's a point of an open rehearsal, it's like really polished and you're just
Yeah.
doing line details. But in the beginning, I mean, that's when all the laborious stuff happens. You know,
Sure.
like you're
Sure.
figuring out, where am I going to put this on the painting and where am I going to start? And once you have,
Right.
then everything flows. But finding that, where am I starting?
Mm.
Right, but I also had just recently someone did a videotaping of me with this painting that I mean I started it. It was in the process, but I have to tell you, I think what goes through my mind in these times is that, it's too bad that the viewers aren't going to actually see the finished because
Right.
there was a lot of,
Oh yeah.
what I mean? There was a lot of work between the time that they videotape me, because I'm trying to explain my process as I'm painting this thing,
Oh my
and the
God.
time that it's actually finished. I mean, it is like day and night,
Yeah.
and it would be so exciting for them to come back and say, well, here's the finish. So at least they could see, the evolution from, being really sketchy or not understanding. Because there's times during a painting or times during anything that people are going to scratch their head and go, I just don't get it. I don't get it. And that's okay. They don't have to get it.
Right. Because it's not done yet. It's not
Right.
complete.
And that exactly. Because and I have to say to them, it's not done. You got to
Yeah.
give me some time, you have to let me create this thing.
When you see an interesting person go by and they have an interesting face or whatever, do you ever have the experience that you're like seeing like almost their true inner self for a split second, that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. And I have to tell you, there was this guy, and this is the one that kind of I got let go. This is the one that kind of got by me.
Oh.
Was I was at the mall. I was actually at the mall,
Mm.
and there was a I'm not sure if was it a mall cop? I'm not sure if it was a mall, but he was wearing one of those Dudley Do-Right type hats,
Oh.
his uniform, and he was a little guy. And he walked by me and I said, oh my God, this guy's face would be so awesome as a painting with his hat on and his uniform. I said, this is my kind of person.
Wow.
And it's just quirky. I think that's what I gravitate to is either quirky or this kind of, I don't know, or someone slouching in a way. But a formal portraiture is just
Yeah.
not my lane. It
Mm.
has to be something a little bit more than that for me to get excited about it.
Mm.
It has to have a little something, a little edge to it.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
At
That's
least I know these things.
Mm.
Well, of course, that gives you a leg up on doing it.
Mm.
Thank you
Right,
so
right.
much for coming to speak with us today. This has been really great. To see her works, please join us at our art gallery during our November Arts Saturday, when we'll be featuring also our 5th annual children's competition winners. Register on Eventbrite. We'd also like to thank our many sponsors for making this program possible, especially the Dracut Cultural Council, which is administering funds from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, please go to dracutarts.com/donate. For more information about our Art Saturdays and other programs, visit our website, dracutarts.com, or email us at dracutarts@gmail.com. This and all our programs are archived on the Dracut Arts YouTube channel. That's YouTube facebook.com/@drakedarts. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.